Burned military medic Jake Rourke tries to live a quiet, low-profile life as a waiter in small-town Colorado, but one photo changed his life. Veterans from across the country rally around him, turning the diner into a place of honor, healing, and community. As Jake reconnects with his past through letters, visits, and quiet acts of kindness, the town begins to see him not as a man with scars, but as someone who stayed when it mattered. In the end, Jake finds peace not in medals or headlines, but in helping others find strength through his story. Welcome to my channel. You ever meet someone who wears their pain on the outside, where the whole damn world can see it? Me neither, until I looked in the mirror one day and realized that someone was me. Name's Jake Rourke. I'm 39, and I used to be a combat medic with the 2nd Infantry Division. Spent 2 tours crawling through dust and shrapnel in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The last mission broke something in me, inside and out. Pulled a buddy out of a burning MRAP after it hit an IED. Saved him, but the fire kissed me goodbye on the way out, burned half my face, neck, and shoulder. I remember the smell more than the pain. Burning metal. Cooking nylon. Flesh. After the discharge, I didn't go home. Not really. I landed in a little washed-out town in Colorado called Ridgeview, population just shy of, you'll be forgotten here. Bought a used truck. Got a tiny studio behind a laundromat, and picked up a job at the Ridgeview Griddle, a diner with flickering neon and bottomless coffee. My boss, Ed, thought he was doing me a favor offering dish duty. Out of sight, out of mind. But I insisted on waiting tables. I didn't want pity. I wanted a routine. Something to stand on while everything inside still felt like smoke and ash. It's funny, you develop systems. Coping hacks. I learned early on that if I approached customers from my left side, my less damaged side, they didn't flinch as much. I kept conversations short, smiles tight, plate steady. Never lingered. Never invited questions. Most folks avoided eye contact. Some whispered. Others just stared too long, like I was a puzzle they didn't want to solve. Kids asked loud questions. Parents shushed them and pulled them close like I was contagious. But you get used to it. You have to. Otherwise, you start swinging at ghosts. Then came that Saturday. It was late afternoon, diner half full. I was carrying a tray of cherry sodas and iced teas, real Americana stuff, to a booth by the window. As I walked past a group of high schoolers, I heard the unmistakable snort of teenage laughter. They were leaned in, whispering like they were sharing state secrets. One of them, some kid with peach fuzz and a varsity jacket, held his phone out like he was snapping a selfie. But I knew better. Yo, he whispered to the kid next to him. Get this angle. He looks like Freddy Krueger's cousin. My heart thudded once, hard and bitter. I didn't flinch. I kept walking. Kept my face locked in neutral like I'd trained myself to. That burn of humiliation? It's different from physical pain. Deeper. More acidic. It crawls up your spine and settles behind your eyes. I delivered the drinks, adjusted a napkin that didn't need adjusting, and turned to head back toward the kitchen. Then I saw him. A man sitting in the corner booth by the pie cooler. Older guy, maybe late 50s. Broad shoulders, square jaw that had seen a few bar fights in its time. He had military posture, even in civilian clothes. He was sitting with a teenager, his son, maybe, explaining something about college applications, judging by the stack of pamphlets between them. But it wasn't the conversation that froze him mid-sentence. It was me. Or more specifically, my arm. As I reached across the table, my sleeve slid up just enough to reveal the ink I never got around to removing. A medic's cross, black and bold, with coordinates etched around it. The mark of our battalion. 2nd Infantry, 1st Brigade. His fork paused in midair. Then his eyes moved from the tattoo to my face. Not the scars. Not the damage. My face. Recognition lit up in his eyes like someone struck a match inside his skull. Dad? The kid asked, blinking. The man didn't answer. Just kept watching me as I turned away, back toward the teen pack with their chuckles and camera phones. That's when I heard the scrape of his chair. A heartbeat later, I felt a shift in the air. The kind of shift you feel when something old and unfinished just stepped into the room again. The moment hung in the air like a thundercloud that hadn't decided whether to break. I was just refilling a coffee pot, but the atmosphere had shifted, heavy with something unspoken. The man from the corner booth stood now. I glanced at him once, didn't linger. I didn't recognize him, but there was something about his stance. The way his eyes followed me. Like a bloodhound catching a scent he hadn't smelled in 20 years. His son, still at the booth, whispered something sharp under his breath, something about creep vibes. I ignored it, like I always did. Let it slide off like steam off a skillet. Then the man did something I hadn't seen before. He reached across the table and grabbed the boy's wrist. Not hard. Not cruel. Just enough to stop him from pressing whatever he was about to post on that phone. He leaned in close, his voice a low rumble I could just barely catch. You just did the worst thing I've ever seen you do. The kid blinked. It's just a picture, Dad. For laughs. The man's eyes didn't waver from my retreating back. That man isn't what you think. Not even close. He rose from the table and walked up to the counter, where Ed was counting receipts and muttering about syrup deliveries. Excuse me, the man said. Ed didn't look up. I'll be right with you. I need to speak to your waiter. The one with the burn scars. That got Ed's attention. He looked up, wary, as if expecting a complaint. Jake's on shift. Is there a problem? No, the man said. I need to thank him. For something that happened a long time ago. I was halfway to the kitchen when Ed called after me. Hey, Jake, guy here wants a word. I stopped, closed my eyes. That familiar pinch in my chest. People didn't want words with me. They wanted distance. Or apologies for their discomfort. Or, worse, inspiration porn. Look how strong he is. Look how brave. No thanks. I shook my head. Not interested. I heard him murmur something to Ed. A moment later, a napkin slid across the counter toward me. On it, a name and number. Scrawled beneath, just 6 words. Lieutenant Rowan's father. He'll understand. I felt the floor shift beneath me. Because I knew that name. Knew it in the way you know the names of the people you almost couldn't save. Lieutenant Simon Rowan. He'd been the last one I pulled from that flaming MRAP. Smoke so thick I couldn't breathe. Metal so hot it blistered my gloves. I'd broken my shoulder yanking his unconscious body free. He lived. Barely. Walked with a cane last I'd heard. Then vanished into the VA system like so many others. This man was his father. I didn't respond. Didn't write back. I folded the napkin and tucked it into my back pocket. That night, I sat at home on the edge of my narrow twin bed. The TV flickered muted weather reports I wasn't listening to. I stared at that napkin. Thought about what it meant to be remembered. Not for the scars I wore, but for something I'd done. I didn't know what it meant yet. Not fully. But something had cracked. And across town, that man, Lieutenant Rowan's father, was typing into a private veterans group on Facebook. Today, I saw a hero mocked while wearing a waiter's uniform. By morning, his post had made it to hundreds of veterans. By noon, thousands. Stories spread fast when they hit the soul. But I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that when I came in for my Sunday morning shift, people looked at me differently. Not with pity, not with discomfort, but with something that looked an awful lot like respect. And I wasn't ready for it. Sunday shifts were usually quiet. Locals nursing hangovers, churchgoers in their polite dresses and clip-on ties, tourists stopping off Highway 14 for flapjacks and a clean bathroom. I liked Sundays for their stillness. But this one was different. I walked in at 7:45 sharp. My boots left little prints on the diner's tiled floor, still damp from the morning mop. I nodded to Ed, tied my apron, and made a beeline for the back sink like always. Only this time, I noticed the stares. Not the usual awkward ones. Not the "oh my god don't let the kids look" ones. No, these were searching. Studied. Respectful, even. The regulars weren't pretending I didn't exist. They were watching me like I mattered. And that, more than anything, set me off balance. Ed met me halfway to the prep station. Jake, he said, voice low. You got mail. Mail. He held out a plain envelope. No return address. Just 3 words scrawled in block letters on the front. DOC Rourke, Ridgeview Griddle. My hands tightened around it. I hadn't been called Doc since I left the Army. Last time was in a dust storm outside Camp Bastion while I was splinting a corporal's leg with a snapped-off antenna. I slipped the envelope into my apron pocket. Didn't open it right away. My chest felt tight, like there were bees inside it instead of lungs. I went through the motions, refills, silverware, wiping down tables, but my hands trembled just enough that I fumbled a water glass and had to mop it up twice. Around 9:15, I slipped into the break room. The door clicked shut behind me. I pulled the envelope from my pocket and carefully tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, lined like from a legal pad. The handwriting was rough. All caps, with pressure so heavy the letters had pressed through the page. You carried me through the night, 2 clicks on a busted leg. You stayed under fire for me. I couldn't move. You did. I'm walking today because of you. If you're washing dishes, I'll mop floors. Some debts can't be paid. Semper Fi. No name. Just those words. I sat down hard on the break room bench. I didn't cry. I don't think I can anymore, not since the surgeries. But I felt something in my chest shift, like a rusted hinge finally opening. And that was just the beginning, because by noon, the posts had spread like wildfire. Photos of me from those damn teenagers' phones, originally captioned with cruelty, were now being reposted with commentary from veterans all across the country. That's Corpseman Rourke. Pulled 4 guys out of a burning convoy in Helmand. Got his face burned doing it. You mock him. You mock all of us. I served with him. Quiet as hell. But when the bullets flew, he was the one dragging you out while others dove for cover. The comment sections blew up. Veterans, active duty, Gold Star families. Demanding apologies. Calling out the kids. Sharing photos of their own scars, physical and emotional. Meanwhile, I was still bussing tables. Still speaking in one-word sentences and keeping to the right side so the newcomers wouldn't flinch. I didn't know yet that something big was coming. Bigger than any napkin or letter. All I knew was that the next day, the Ridgeview griddle was going to look a lot different. Monday mornings were usually dead. Quiet enough you could hear the syrup bottles settle. But not this one. That morning, I pulled into the Ridgeview griddle's cracked gravel lot at 7:55 a.m., and the place was packed. Now, this is a diner with a counter that fits six booths, and a juke that hasn't worked right since '07. Usually, we're lucky to get a couple truckers, maybe a nurse or 2 from the night shift. But that day, there were uniforms. Not 1, not 3, a dozen. All branches, all ages, dress blues, classes. One guy even had his beret tucked tied under his belt like it was inspection day. They were sitting still, straight-backed, quiet as chapel pews. Each table had a little folded note card, standing up beside the salt shaker. I passed one as I came through the door. Thank you, DOC. I froze. Ed met me by the counter, eyes wide. Jake, they've been coming since 7. All ordered coffee. Nobody said much. They're here for you. I swallowed, throat suddenly dry. For me. He nodded. One of them, Marine, crew cut, big shoulders. He asked what time you start. Said they wanted to be here when you walked in. I scanned the room. Some I recognized from a lifetime ago. Others just nodded as I passed. None of them stared at my face. They looked at me the way you look at someone who matters. It rattled me. Deep down. Like someone had turned the gravity up in the room. I ducked into the back, changed into my apron, washed my hands twice even though they were already clean. My reflection in the tiny mirror above the mop sink didn't look like anything special. Just a burned-up vet, thin at the edges, with eyes too tired for his age. I stepped out into the dining room. The moment I crossed into view, the room stood. Every veteran in that diner rose to their feet, like it was reveille and I was the flag. I stood frozen, unsure what to do. Then one of them, he looked like he belonged in a recruiting poster from the 90s, gunnery sergeant striped sharp on his sleeves, walked over. Snapped a salute. Doc Rourke, he said, voice steady and loud enough to carry. Thank you for not leaving anyone behind that night. I didn't move at first. Just stared at him, the words hitting me harder than any explosion ever did. I finally lifted my hand, slowly, and returned the salute. We shook. One by one, they approached. Some I remembered. Others were complete strangers. But they all came. They all shook my hand. A Navy officer, young, maybe 30, handed me a small velvet box. This belonged to my father, she said. He was with you in Helmand. He passed last year, but he made me promise to give this to you if I ever found you. She opened the box. Inside was a purple heart. Scratched, tarnished, but unmistakable. He always said, she continued, eyes shining, you deserved it more than he did. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even nod. I just placed a hand over the box and held it. Outside, a local news van pulled into the lot. Ed, who just 3 days ago told me maybe I should stick to the kitchen on busy shifts, was suddenly talking to a reporter about how honored he was to have a hero on staff. I stayed behind the counter for most of the shift. Took plates out, poured coffee, nodded where I could. But the whole place was different now. The customers looked me in the eye, asked for my section, told their kids to shake my hand. And then they walked in. 2 men. One younger, limping. The other, familiar. Lieutenant Simon Rowan and his father. Rowan's limp was bad, but he moved like a man who didn't accept help unless the ground gave out. He spotted me immediately and crossed the floor like he was on a mission. You probably don't remember me, he said. 3rd vehicle in the convoy, I replied, voice low. Femur fracture. Shrapnel to the lower back. You kept trying to stand. even with a broken leg. His jaw twitched. Then he smiled. We hugged. Not a quick one either. The kind that says something without a single word. Then Rowan turned to a teenage boy standing a few feet behind him. This is my brother, Drew. He's got something to say to you. I recognized him immediately. The kid who snapped that photo. The one who made the horror movie comment. Now, he looked smaller. Not just in size. In spirit. His eyes were red. His voice broke when he spoke. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. I didn't. I was stupid. I looked him over. Saw fear there. Not of me, but of what he'd done. Of what it meant. I forgive you, I said. He blinked. No one chooses their scars, I added. But we do choose how we treat people who carry them. He nodded slowly. Like that line landed somewhere deep. As they turned to leave, I glanced around the room again. This place. This little diner with its chipped mugs and its cracked booths, it had become a battlefield of another kind. A place where shame and pride, cruelty and redemption, all collided over scrambled eggs and burnt toast. And I, Jake Rourke, the medic who vanished after the war, was no longer invisible. By Tuesday, everything had changed. The Ridgeview Griddle, once the kind of place where people ordered the same thing every day and never asked your name, had become something else entirely. Veterans still came, but now they brought their families. Church groups left prayers with their tips. A retired pilot dropped off a framed citation for me, something I didn't even remember being part of. It was like a snowball had rolled down the mountain, picking up stories and scars and respect along the way. But me? I kept my head down, kept pouring coffee, kept moving from table to table like muscle memory was the only thing holding me upright. I wasn't doing it for attention. I was doing it because I didn't know how to be anything else anymore. Then I found the card. It was on my break room chair, folded carefully, not stuffed or tossed. Like whoever left it wanted to be sure I'd notice but not be embarrassed. Inside, written in clean, blocky handwriting. Your scars are medals we can't wear for you. No signature. No hint of who'd left it. But I knew the writing. I'd seen it on a napkin, weeks ago. Drew Rowan. The same kid who once tried to turn my face into a punchline. I looked up through the break room window. Drew was there in the dining area, not snapping pictures this time. Not goofing around. He was sitting with half a dozen classmates. Notebooks open. A first responder, a paramedic in a Ridgeview EMS jacket, stood in front of them, demonstrating how to apply a tourniquet. Drew wasn't watching the clock. He wasn't trying to impress a girl. He was focused, dialed in, and I realized they were learning basic trauma care. In my diner, I asked Ed about it. He just shrugged like it was no big deal. Drew asked if he could use the space once a week for training, Ed said. Figured it was the least we could do, right? I stood there, watching a girl about 16 learn how to find a pulse in a limp wrist. Her hands shook slightly. Not from fear, just the weight of doing something real. I remembered what that felt like. The first time I treated a real gunshot wound, hands trembling so bad I had to steady them on my knees. I stepped back into the kitchen, leaned against the fridge, and just breathed. There's a weight to being invisible. But there's another weight that comes when people suddenly see you. When they expect something from you. When you become more than just a face they try not to stare at. And for the first time in years, I felt it. Not the weight of shame, but the weight of being useful. That night, after close, I stayed behind to mop. Ed offered to do it himself. Hero of the house shouldn't be scrubbing the floors, he said, but I waved him off. Some things I still needed to do myself. When I finished, I stood in the doorway of the dining room, just looking at the tables, the booths, the folded carts, the faces that had passed through. There was a stillness in the place, even with the jukebox humming softly in the background, like something sacred had happened between those old linoleum walls. Then I heard the bell above the front door. A man in full army dress blue stepped inside. Stiff collar, shoes shining like glass. He looked around and locked eyes with me. You Jake Rourke? I nodded. He reached into his jacket and handed me a letter. Thick envelope. Government seal. The Pentagon, he said. Medal of Honor ceremony. You've been nominated. I didn't even open it. I just looked at him and said, thanks, but I'm not going. He raised an eyebrow. Sir, I'm not a symbol, I said. I'm not a headline. I just want to be Jake. He nodded slowly, like he got it. Like maybe he'd been to that place too. Well, he said, adjusting his cover, if you ever change your mind, they'll be waiting. He left the envelope on the counter. I didn't touch it for hours. Didn't need to. Because that night, the griddle didn't need medals. It had something better. It had people remembering how to look at each other with kindness. The letter stayed on the counter for 2 days. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. I'd already decided. People kept asking, though. You going, Jake? No. But it's the Medal of Honor. I'm aware. Truth is, I wasn't afraid of the cameras. I just didn't want to be turned into a headline. I'd spent years trying to fade into the wallpaper. Being invisible felt safer. But invisibility can grow mold. And lately, I'd been watching things change. Like Drew Rowan. Every Tuesday now, he ran those first aid workshops. High school kids learning how to stop bleeding, how to splint a broken arm. I caught him one morning practicing CPR on a dummy made from couch cushions and duct tape. He looked up at me and grinned. I figured if you can carry a guy with a collapsed lung through a sandstorm, I can learn to use a tourniquet. I didn't smile much, but that time I did. That same week, a few local businesses got together and hosted a fundraiser. Not for me, with me. We raised enough for a new trauma kit for the school and a second-hand AED unit for the diner. Just in case, Drew said. And because you taught me not all heroes wear medals. Some wear aprons. By Friday, people didn't flinch at my scars anymore. They nodded when I walked by. Some even asked for my section, not to avoid me. And I started talking more. Not much, but enough. Morning, Frank. How's the shoulder? Black coffee, Miss Elaine? I was becoming part of this town, not as a symbol, not as Doc Rourke, just as Jake. A man who'd survived something awful and chose not to disappear. And honestly, that felt better than any ceremony ever could. Saturday morning came with frost on the windows and a warmth inside the griddle I couldn't explain. Folks came early, not just the regulars. New faces too. Veterans. Families. People who'd read the post, shared it, followed the story online, and just showed up. No press. No speeches. Just quiet gestures. A man left a folded 20 under his coffee mug with a note. For the one who stayed behind so others didn't have to. A woman hugged me at the register. Said nothing. Just cried. Left a photo of her brother in uniform next to the tip jar. Ed pulled me aside around noon. He looked nervous, like he was about to confess to stealing silverware. I changed the sign, he said. I blinked. What sign? He pointed to the entrance. I stepped out front and saw it. Proud to have American heroes on our staff. Jake Rourke serves here. My chest tightened. Not with pain, just something heavier than words. I wanted to be angry, wanted to tell Ed I didn't ask for this, but I couldn't. Because deep down, part of me needed to see it. Needed to believe I could be known and still belong. I went back to work like usual. Filled mugs. Cleared plates. Told one dad his kid had syrup on his chin. The usual. But the truth was, nothing was usual anymore. And for once, I didn't want to run from that. The rush had died down. Afternoon sun bled through the windows, casting long shadows over half-eaten pie slices and quiet conversations. I was wiping down the counter when I saw him, Carl Rowan. He stood by the jukebox, hands in his pockets, eyes tracing the room like he was remembering something that hadn't happened yet. You got a minute? He asked. I nodded and followed him out to the alley where we took smoke breaks, even though neither of us smoked. He leaned against the wall, watching his breath fog in the cold. You know, he said, with your record, you could be anywhere. D.C., Arlington, Virginia hospitals, liaison posts. Why Ridgeview? I didn't answer right away. The dumpster buzzed quietly behind us. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once. Finally, I said, because here, I'm just Jake. Not a headline. Not a poster. Not someone who reminds people of something they'd rather forget. Carl nodded like he understood. And he did, more than most. We stood in silence for a bit. Two men who'd seen too much, carrying it differently. Then he asked the question that stopped me cold. You ever think maybe people need to remember? I turned to him. Not for medals. Not for parades. But to understand what it really means when someone says, thank you for your service. I looked away. My hand grazed the scar tissue under my collar. Felt the tug of memory trying to rise. I don't know, I said honestly. Some days, I just want to be a guy who refills your coffee. Carl chuckled. And some days, he said, that's exactly what makes you the kind of hero they'll remember. He left after that. No big speech. No handshake. Just a nod. The kind soldiers give each other across a room when words fail. Later that night, I sat by the kitchen sink, the Medal of Honor invitation still unopened in my locker. I wasn't ready to decide. But for the first time, I wasn't ready to throw it away either. Monday morning hit different. When I pulled into the lot, the line was already around the block. Not just veterans this time, moms with kids, school teachers, shop owners. Half of Ridgeview, it felt like. Ed met me at the door with 2 thermoses and a worried look. We're gonna run out of everything. Inside, the diner was buzzing, but no one was impatient. They weren't here just for pancakes. They were here for something else. Me. But I wasn't the reason. Not entirely. Turns out, Drew and his classmates had gone to the town council. Asked if Ridgeview could host a community first aid day. Their proposal? Let's teach what Jake knows. Let's keep passing it on. That's how I ended up in the parking lot that afternoon, standing in front of 2 folding tables, helping a teenage girl figure out how to use gauze and pressure to stop a wound from bleeding. She asked me what to do if the bleeding didn't stop. Keep your hands steady, I told her. Stay calm. Pressure, elevation, then back up. She nodded hard, lip trembling. You got it, I said. I meant it. There were workshops all over the lot. One near the fire truck. One near the ambulance. A paramedic gave CPR demos using a beat-up mannequin named Carl. The hardware store raffled off emergency kits. Someone even made pins that read, "Be someone's doc." Everywhere I looked, people were learning, asking, helping. And I felt it, clear as day. My story didn't end with scars. It had just started again, through them. Near sundown, Drew walked over with a clipboard and a nervous smile. They want you to say something, he said. I laughed. I'm not a speech guy. You don't have to give one. Just stand there. Be seen. That hit harder than any salute ever had. So I stood. No podium. No script. Just me. Burns and all. Watching his kids practice saving lives because someone once stayed in the fire to save theirs. And that's when I understood something. Honor isn't always a ceremony. Sometimes it's a quiet afternoon where a whole town gathers not to worship the past, but to build something better because of it. A week passed. The headlines moved on. The news vans disappeared. The crowd died down. But the change didn't. At the griddle, regulars still left folded napkins with "Thanks, Doc" scribbled across them. Veterans still stopped by, not to salute, but to sit, share a quiet meal, swap a story without having to explain the ending. And me? I kept working. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. The metal letter stayed sealed, still tucked in my locker behind the bandages and instant coffee packs. I hadn't changed my mind. Not really. I didn't need to stand on a stage in D.C. I had this town, these people, this diner. Then, one morning, Drew left something beside the coffee machine, a wooden box about the size of a shoebox. Inside, a first aid kit. Basic. Neatly packed. On top, a handwritten note. This is for the next person who walks in here scared, bleeding, or broken. Teach them what you taught us. Because sometimes, healing starts with knowing someone stayed. That got me. I sat in the back booth and held that box like it was made of something heavier than wood. Like it carried every second I'd ever spent dragging someone through sand and smoke and silence. And I realized I wasn't just passing through Ridgeview anymore. I belonged to it. Later that day, Ed asked me if I was finally going to open the letter. I looked out the window. A father was teaching his daughter how to tie a sling using a dish towel. The teenager who once mocked me was now helping another kid check a pulse. The town I thought would turn away had wrapped itself around me, not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. So I said, no. He raised an eyebrow. Still, I nodded. I don't need a medal to know what I did. And I don't need to be reminded of the worst day of my life when I've got a whole town trying to build something good out of it. He clapped my shoulder. Fair enough. As the diner closed up that night, I caught my reflection in the front door's glass. Still burned. Still scarred. But I didn't flinch anymore. Because I saw something else, too. Someone useful. Someone steady. Someone who stayed. Sometimes, that's all you need to be. Just enough light in someone else's dark.